In the quiet town that existed in the murky space between time, a diverse group of people lived their lives, blissfully unaware of the enigmatic forces that governed their reality. The people are from time spanning from the 1800s to the present day. They live displaced, struggling to comprehend what has bound them together. But the inhabitants go about living, adhering to this new existence they find themselves a part of. As the days unfolded, they would come to learn what life in the town was truly like. The town would morph before their eyes. The cobbled, dusty roads of the 1850s transformed into neon-lit boulevards reminiscent of the 1980s, only to shift abruptly to the roaring 20s or the picturesque suburbs of the 1950s, to modern-day asphalt streets with modern electronics. The changes were seamless to the inhabitants, but for the displaced, each time period brought fresh challenges. As the years passed, despite the disorienting shifts, they formed an odd camaraderie. The town's inhabitants continued their daily routines, forming relationships and pursuing their livelihoods. However, there was an unspoken terror, one they did not want to acknowledge, in hope that the previous encounter would be the last. Those from the current area were bound to it, acting as they would have, without awareness of the strange town they found themselves in. In time, one could break this trance. But for many, it was a bliss to not have to think or concern oneself with the issue at hand. A collective shiver gripped the entire town when the shifts were to happen. Those who were not native to the current era reacted with fear and desperation as the scenery began to change. Anxiety would grow, panic ensued, and the inhabitants succumbed to terror, disrupting the delicate balance of their lives. Only those of the current period were calm, with no care, other than what one would normally fuss or have chores about. 5 individuals from different backgrounds would come together, each bringing a unique perspective from their respective periods and lives. They, like others, had learned to accept the temporal shifts with a blend of annoyance and trepidation. But they could not accept the danger that loomed over them. They believed there must be something that can be done. Iowentha, a Mohawk man in his mid-20s from the early 1800s, in traditional Mohawk clothing underneath an 1800s frock coat. His silent footsteps moved through the wilderness outside of town with the wisdom of a seasoned warrior, and his keen eyes scanned the surroundings, ever watchful. Within the town, his eyes observed with a mix of curiosity and caution. Eleanor, a black woman in her mid-20s from the 1950s, Kentucky in a 1951 striped petticoat dress. She was raised in a segregated community, but was well educated. The diverse living conditions and the freedom she witnessed in the different eras both astounded and inspired her, challenging her understanding of what could be. Margaret, a wealthy WASP woman in her early 40s from 1880 Massachusetts in a conservative Victorian lilac dress, struggles to adapt to the modern world that occasionally materialized around her. She holds firmly to the religiosity and social expectations of her time. She cannot reconcile her ingrained beliefs with the new realities she is faced with. Big Mountain Jasper, an enigmatic grizzled mountain man in his mid-30s from 1850, wearing ragged clothes and animal skins. He is resistant to the diversity of his newfound companions. He brings an unwelcomed hostility to the group because of his racist animosity toward Eleanor and Iowentha. Yet, his growing fascination with Margaret and the compelling need to join their cause saw him gradually shedding his isolation and reluctance. John, a success and affluent Texan meatpacking magnate from the Roaring Twenties, is the final member. He is in a constant state of anxiety. In this strange town, he clings to his faith, finding refuge in prayer as he navigates the bewildering changes around him. Nothing about this town or life feels right to him. It is typical day in the town. The day began with the usual bustle, but the air was heavy with anticipation from the group. The initial interactions of their tentative alliance are a blend of curiosity and misunderstanding. Iowentha moved around the exterior of the town, ever watchful for the slightest sign. Eleanor, with her astute mind, traditions across the eras. She voiced her thoughts to Margaret. "It's astounding, Margaret, how different our worlds are." Margaret, still clutching the norms of her time, because of her rigid upbringing, initially finds it difficult to connect with her diverse companions, her worldview challenged at every turn. She replies, "Indeed, Eleanor, it's quite a challenge to adapt to these modern distinctions." Eleanor and Margaret conversed about the disparities in their lives, marveling at the stark differences. Eleanor's voice, filled with both wonder and a touch of sadness, resonated with Margaret. Though from an era of strict norms and expectations, Margaret found herself increasingly drawn into these discussions, her curiosity piqued by the insights Eleanor offered. Gruff and unwelcoming, Big Mountain Jasper kept his distance, especially from Eleanor and Iawantha. But his curiosity about Margaret's poise and elegance often drew him closer to the group, albeit with a mixture of skepticism and intrigue. John, despite his inner turmoil, sought to understand and connect with his companions between muttering prayers under his breath. His whispered pleas to a higher power were a constant undercurrent to the group's interactions. Margaret, Big Mountain Jasper, and Eleanor feel they understand his need for faith in this endeavor. Together, these 5 individuals from different times and walks of life began to forge a bond, their shared experiences in the town creating an alliance of understanding and mutual respect. As the day wore on, the town's transformation began. The group moved through asphalt streets as they became dusty roads. From the dreary shadows, a dark figure emerges, casting an ominous glow. The terror was universal as the dark figure appeared. People hide, cry, and run to try to avoid the inevitable. The dark figure has an opaque illuminated sphere floating at chest level. Many saw it as the eye of the shadowy Cyclops. Once caught in its gaze, a large, ominous flash goes off when it sees its prey. They are sucked into the light of the eye, one after another. Many are taken in this assailment. Some fought to resist its pull, clawing at the ground and grasping onto walls with all their might. They cling to each other in a desperate attempt, but it's to no use. A flash of light, a scream, and another soul was lost, pulled into the sphere that many see and call its eye. Iawantha, with his perceptive nature, silently leads the way, guiding the group and those that noticed into hiding. He shows them how to conceal themselves from the spectral presence. As they hide, the group witnesses the spectacle of the dark figure's cruel ritual. It would snatch unsuspecting souls, still in the trance of their time, and the terrified fully aware. Margaret, keeping herself quiet but finding courage she didn't know she possessed, stayed close to Iawantha. Her voice barely a whisper, sought guidance. "What do we do now?" Eleanor rallies the townspeople. "Stay calm, everyone. We'll get through this together," she says. She guides people over and over to safety, her courage to run out to those in panic with understanding, empathy, and a calm demeanor becomes a beacon of hope as more and more souls were claimed by the shadowy presence. "Only fools would gather together to be easily slaughtered," thinks Big Mountain Jasper, looking at the numbers that are following Iawantha and Eleanor. He hides away from the group with Margaret, but keeps her, in sight. His survival instincts, honed in the wilderness, take action. John hides but is lost in his prayers. He finds himself perpetually out of his element, struggling to comprehend the unfathomable. He gets the attention of others around him, unbeknownst to him. "Lord, save us," he says. He makes fervent appeals loudly, ignoring the panic around him. Some join him, others are upset, afraid his words will betray their concealments. As quickly as the figure appeared, it was gone, leaving the people to once again gather themselves, taking stock of who was lost. With the threat of the dark figure ever looming, the inhabitants go back to their lives as best they can. The group comes back together, grappling with the challenge of understanding and confronting the threat. They set their aim on the mystery. Margaret, once the embodiment of a conservative 1880s upbringing, finds herself growing more open-minded with each temporal leap. Her mind racing for solutions, discovers latent investigative abilities within. The societal shackles that had once defined her were slowly falling away, replaced by a newfound openness and a thirst for understanding the unknown. Such amazing and fanciful ideas have come to be in such a short time, she says to herself. Why should I constrain myself to a time and place I'm no longer forced to be a part of, she thinks. At Margaret's instruction, she, Iowentha, Eleanor, form a coterie of thinkers, sharing knowledge from their time, personal history, and ideas. Big Mountain, Jasper Perceptions, begins to undergo a profound change as he witnessed the strength, intelligence, and resilience of those he had once deemed inferior during the attack, and as they worked to find a solution. The walls he had built around himself, born of his time and experiences, begin to crumble. He thinks most would have run or given up. However, their task to comprehend the dark figure and its motivations was fraught with challenges. The town had become divided not just by shifts of time, but now by those that wanted them to succeed and those that wanted them to stop. Many filled with fear became increasingly irrational. Rumors and accusations spread, fueling a climate of mistrust and paranoia. This divide was not just external but also internal. The group's unity was tested as they navigated not only the physical dangers presented by the dark figure, but also the psychological strain of their situation. But quickly they see their attempts to understand the dark figure are futile. Nothing they or anyone who has been in the town for some time knew anything that gave them any indication of the true nature of the dark figure. Even the descriptions they got from different people were never the same. The once cohesive fabric of their camaraderie showed signs of strain as the pressure of their circumstances weighed heavily on each of them. Against the pleas of others, they devised a plan. They will see what can hurt the monster. They gather things they believe will harm a spirit or a flesh and blood being: weapons, salt, iron. They even try prayer. But in the end, nothing seemed to work. With each failed attempt, frustration and despair seeped into the fabric of their existence, leaving them questioning the nature of their reality, while irrational crowds tried to persuade them from investigating and attacking further, fearing they will anger the dark figure. John, torn between faith and fear, becomes an indecisive liability, believing they don't need to learn anything, siding with those that believe God would save them. As the group pledged to resume their efforts, many can't and won't accept them, continuing their inquiries. In their desperation, many descend into irrational yelling. They believe the group was exacerbating the situation. Chaos in the streets becomes the formation of a violent mob. They believe they have to stop them, kill them, or give them to the dark figure. Iowentha and Big Mountain Jasper defend the group. They stand between the mob and the others. Big Mountain Jasper, displaying unexpected camaraderie, fights alongside Iowentha. They readily take down attackers one after another. Amid the chaos, the dark shadow continued its relentless hunt. The town, lost in its own madness, failed to notice the shifting eras around them. Big Mountain Jasper and Iowentha, bravery and resolve a stark contrast to the crowd's hysteria. They held their ground against the enraged crowd. As the dark figure steadily moves closer, John falls to his knees holding a crucifix necklace in prayer, tears falling down his face. He is taken by the dark figure with the opaque, illuminated eye in a flash. His prayers unanswered. Those praying see this and are overcome with fear. Most stop, panicking and running, only to run into the gaze themselves. The rest hide or follow the others in the group. The group can't believe it, but they have to keep fighting and pleading to the people of the town that want to stop them. Big Mountain Jasper takes on most of the crowd, allowing the others a chance to get away. As he is fighting back the mob, he succumbs to the sinister gaze as well, disappearing in a flash of malevolent light, leaving behind a void where he once stood. The attackers panic as they see him taken. Many of them are taken too. Eleanor pushes on, despite how desperate the situation has become. She leads people to safety again and again. But in a moment, a blinding flash enveloped her, tearing her away. The dark figure takes another in. Its insatiable hunger. The town, now a place of fear and confusion, watches those that tried to fight, to save them, are taken one by one. Iowentha is filled with anger and despair as he watches helplessly as his allies are consumed. Margaret looks on behind him in complete horror. On a television show, paranormal investigators are interviewed. The investigators interpret backscatter and images as spirits captured in photos and video. This revelation elicits a myriad of reactions from the audiences at home. Some are distraught, saddened, excited, curious, frustrated, yet most dismissed it as mere entertainment or fiction. The truth of the reality of town glimpses in this revelation. The town is a place where the inhabitants are spirits, and the dark figure with the opaque illuminated eye are people with cameras in the living world. Each click, each filming in the living world has the chance to take souls. Margaret is changed forever by the events that transpired, but it's overshadowed by despair. She asks, "What was our struggle for, Iowentha? What was the purpose of our courage, of our grand endeavor? Do we continue? What do we do now?" Iowentha, looking out to town, replies, "Perhaps it was to remind us that we matter. Perhaps, I don't know. We learn, we fight, we live, we press on. What else can we do?" Margaret and Iowentha, left in the town, grappled with the reality of their existence and the fate of their companions. They watched in horror, unable to save their friends or themselves. They have no choice but to continue without the knowledge of what their reality really is, and to never know what happened to the others. While Eleanor, Big Mountain Jasper, John, and countless others are in places of darkness, isolation, and despair, with no knowledge, they are trapped in photos and video. While the living world remained oblivious to their plight, seeing it as entertainment of speculation. In a dark, isolated place, Eleanor sits, afraid, alone. She doesn't know where she is. There is no here. John sits alone, his faith broken as he sits in darkness with no hope. Big Mountain Jasper looks on in desperation at darkness and nothing all around him. Others find themselves in the same dark fate, in darkness, in isolation, in nothing.